Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a nominated filmmaker, and of course, using a technology and other than Mr. Nico Casavecchia.
Hi, Daniel. How are you?
I'm fabulous, fabulous, Mr. Nico. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
My name is Nico Casavecchia. I'm a writer and a director based in Los Angeles. I'm from Argentina. I've been in the US for a while now, and my work is in filmmaking, but all throughout my career, I've used technology to tell stories in different ways. And um, from short films to feature films to commercials. I've done many different things in my career, and uh, yeah, I'm glad to be here. Excited to be talking to you.
Mr. Nico Casavecchia, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about from atoms to AI, combining tech and storytelling and a lot more. What inspired you to explore the connection between atomic scale technology and AI through storytelling?
Okay, so I think you're referring to a project that I did some years back, and it's a commission for IBM that was done by IBM scientists in a lab in California. So that commission came about as a way to promote basic science in the IBM labs, because IBM is one of the few companies that actually that's what's called that's what called is basic science, which is investigating certain topics just for patents. So it means that it doesn't necessarily will go into a product but it will actually be something that along the way can trigger some discoveries and hopefully some patents and then eventually products. So it's a little bit of a slower process. It doesn't get too much light on the business, and so the commission was, all right, what is the kind of story we can tell about this lab working in this nanotechnology and specifically storage, kind of like what do you make out of hard drives. And so they have done years prior a logo, IBM logo done with individual atoms. And the task was, all right, if we can do an image with individual atoms, why not do a whole stop motion film by basically sequencing those images one after another. And so the job was, all right, what story can be told in this amount of time with these resources, and what kind of thing we can create that could promote this lab in a way that feels human and grounds this into a human story. And we started working with, first of all, you start working with the limitations. You start thinking, okay, can I delineate what are the limits of the project, right? How many atoms can this people move in a day, right? And based on that, we started creating a character design and eventually animation that came about the way you see on the final result. Um, and the thing is done with very cumbersome equipment. It's done with like a needle that moves uh, an individual atom from a copper plate. So this is to get your head around how small this is. You can think about holding the planet Earth between your hands and having a needle that moves a golf ball in the street of New York. That's how small an atom is related to a human scale, right? And how a needle on this machine moves an atom of copper into the next position. So it was a very complicated process. The scientists locked themselves up in the lab for 3 months to execute. I wasn't allowed to touch anything. And it came out great. And I think that is one of the most memorable things that I've done and that people still remember. And once in a while, like you can see online people talking about it, which is very funny. It got a Guinness World Record, and it was a crazy adventure. Um, and that's kind of like one example of the things I've done in my career that have found my way. I'm not really sure why, but that have found my way and ended up collaborating with. Yeah.
Mr. Nico, how do you define technological storytelling in the context of your work?
I think that when you think about technology and storytelling, and you go back in time, you can think about the history of art extremely intertwined to the mediums of production. So the technology of the time really has a dialogue that determines what is being said and how it's been said. So if you think about the story of pigments in painting, right? What kind of stories and paintings you would uh, artists will create based on the pigments, that's completely intertwined. And if you think about the story of cinema, it's a story about a new technology that comes up and allows people to create new things. So I feel like there's a constant dialogue between technology and art. And nowadays, the way that I reflect it in the context of my work, I think, um, is to see what is the new conversation happening, and trying to experiment with that latest technology. So I've done, for example, a VR back in 2018. I premiered a VR film called Battle Scar, and that film was created in the context of a VR wave. Everybody was talking about VR. I tried it for the first time, and I thought it was a medium that felt very expressive, a medium that was very exciting to try new things and to communicate with audiences. So I set to create something that would explore the expressiveness of the medium in a way that I could tell the story about a uh, basically a Puerto Rican American kid living in the New York City of the late 70s and trying to conquer the punk rock scene with a band, right? So basically, I told a story, a battle of the bands in the 70s. The way that I told that story, or I should say we, because it was I had a co-creator and a whole team of people. The way we told that story was by trying to make sure that we understood what was native to that medium of VR, right? So that takes a little bit of an understanding and a research of what are the potentials of the medium, and then trying to exploit that potential to tell a story. Now, the story itself, it has to be a human story, and story is something that humans have been telling for millennia, right? So what you're trying to do is trying to use the new medium in a way that feels connected to a tradition that has been going on for a long, long time. If that makes sense.
Makes sense, Mr. Nico. And why is it storytelling particularly crucial for explaining complex tech like AI and nanotechnology?
I think, storytelling is crucial for humanity as the way that we understand and synthesize the human experience, and explain ourselves what is going on. Is a way to, at least for me, is a way to process these ideas and the everyday life and changes that we go through. So when you think about these mediums, and that could be so abstract and can bring so much change to society, what you're going to see immediately is stories attached to them, right? Narratives and stories. Some stories we tell are fictional stories, and we all agree and understand that those stories are not real, right? And some
Yes.
stories we buy and believe as to be real, right? So when we think about what will happen with AI, we're telling a story, and some people tell a dystopian story. Some people tell a utopian story, right? The dystopian story is AI will take over the world, and and the utopian story is AI will save humanity, solve climate change, and rescue humans from all its illnesses. I think through these stories we process and we plan for the future, and then it's a thing. I think is a very powerful tool for change and for understanding and agreeing on what course of action do we want to take as people in our personal lives, but also as a society.
As a society, indeed. And what common mistakes do tech innovators make when trying to communicate their ideas?
It's a good question. I work a lot with tech. It's my bread and butter. I'm not a tech. I'm not an engineer, and I'm not an entrepreneur, but I'm in that world. I live with them. I work with them. I live in California, which is a huge tech hub, and my work is always with tech, especially my commercial work. The thing that pays the bills is with tech companies. Um, I think that sometimes people forget that there is a connection with society that has to go beyond the excitement of features or releases or things that are trapped inside this bubble of Silicon Valley, right? Sometimes the metrics we use are disconnected from the real life of everyday people. And I think that, that could be true nowadays for everybody. It seems like we're all living in our bubbles, especially the bubbles that carry a lot of influence and a lot of power and a lot of money, tend to get disconnected from reality easier because it's very clear that we're justifying anything um, uh, under the guise of the success that these technologies are having. So sometimes I feel people get isolated from regular folk that have necessities and ideas that may not be connected to this. And I feel that you see that reflected, especially sometimes in product adoption and the way that they think about these industries. We have seen tech taking over every part of life, right? We see tech taking over cinema with the streaming, right? We've seen tech taking over transportation with Uber, right? Just to give you two examples. And in the case of cinema, sometimes there's a confusion about what people value and what people think of a story. And I think that it would benefit the industry as a whole to try to reconnect with those industries that they're trying to disrupt and try to understand beyond fundamentals what is exactly that they're stand for, what their values are, what people are hoping to get, and what people use to those worlds to engage with.
Beyond the fundamental, indeed. And how has the relationship between human and technology evolved in your storytelling framework?
It's a good question. I personally have always tried to have an eye on new technologies, but go back to classic storytelling. I keep going back to old movies. I keep going back to books. I keep going back to theater. I feel like if you are influenced by the medium you're producing in, sometimes that could create a feedback loop that deters from the quality of your work. If you're only absorbing the work of your contemporaries in the same mediums they produce, let's say, for example, if I'm doing a film and I'm only watching the films that came out this year, that creates a feedback loop that sometimes we feel is connecting us with the contemporary dialogue, but um, most times it really removes you from the depth that you can go if you consume culture from different times, different eras that was not creative under the same incentives that we create the objects of culture that we create today. So I think it's a little bit of a balance on keep an eye on the conversation, but always keep, still have a deep understanding of what culture came before you and what led to the things that we're creating now, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Mr. Nico makes sense. And as as an Emmy nominated filmmaker, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
I don't know if my short-term and long-term goals are connected to the Emmy nomination, but what I can tell you is my short-term goal is to stay alive in the context of humanity right now. Everything is shifting and everything is so uncertain and so many things happening around the world. So I'm just trying to do my thing, man. My
Yes.
long-term goal is to hopefully uh, keep expressing myself and find avenues and opportunities to tell stories and to make movies and and work with amazing people. That's my long-term goal, I guess.
Amazing people indeed, and good luck to your goals, Mr. Nico, and
Thank you, Daniel.
looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be, of course, like you?
I don't know who would like to be like me, honestly. If you ask me what advice do I have for young creators, I would say execution is more important than ideation. It's very important that we create things and put them out. And the life of an artist is only made by the things that they actually did. So, plan, pitch, create, think, have an eye on collaborating and have an eye on fundraising and all the good things. But at the same time, always have something you actually create on your own, something you can control, you can put out. That's the only reality of an artist, is the dialogue that he can establish with a real audience. I would say that's my advice.
Yes, and thank you for that advice, Mr. Nico. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Yeah, I brought a couple books that I thought were crucial for me. One is a poetry book, and I know s nowadays people are not too connected to poetry, but it really influenced the way it really influenced my youth. I read this book when I was very young, and it really ignited my passion for for seeing the world, for having experiences. And it's The Flowers of Evil by Baudelaire, the French poet. And then a more contemporary book that I loved and really influenced my career was Just Kids by Patti Smith. Is a book that was influential. It was a book that was discovered by my wife, Mercedes, and it was very influential in the writing of Battle Scar, which is this film that I told you about. I was living in New York at the time, and I was astonished to dive into the world of the book and discover that it was so different than the world of the New York I was living in. And that was really a fascinating thing that books give us, is the ability to enter these worlds and almost do this archaeological exploration on a city that overlaps with the city that it exists right now, but quite doesn't fit in any way. So that was a Patti Smith. Just Kids is a book that I really, really recommend. So much fun.
Thank you for that recommended books, Mr. Nico. And let's talk about the practical applications. What industries beyond entertainment could benefit from this tech storytelling fusion?
Um, I think storytelling can help any industry. I think, let's put it this way: anything you're doing right now, anything that requires leadership, can benefit from a common story. Stories are the actual narratives that bond us together. It's the thing that make people coalesce into one idea, right? So either you could be a marketing manager at a company, you could be any sort of leader, you could be a CEO at a I don't know, food for pets or something. You're gonna need a story that helps you um, explain the people under you and the people you want to convince. What is it that you've been doing? Why what are you doing is important? What obstacles did you face, and how you um, survive the obstacles? And so those stories, you will find that anybody that has a role of leadership in any sort of industry benefits from storytelling. And now, if you tell me, okay, how can we bring the ingredient of technology to this? I think perhaps one interesting thing about um, large language models, or LLMs like ChatGPT, is that it has the ability to help you um, brainstorm ideas and kind of like craft storytelling out of your experiences. So I am of the idea that you have to collaborate with these things as opposed to let them run the show, because I don't think they're very interesting in their output. But if you start working out a story, if you're working out like a speech you want to give, if you're working out a story, let's say a narrative that you want to tell on a meeting, or something that it's important to you, I think these are great tools to brainstorm with and polish your storytelling. And also to try to say, all right, how can these experiences fit the framework of story? Story has a framework, right? There's a
Yes.
language to stories. We all know this, right? Like, great storytellers could be in the family. Like, in a family dinner, there's always an uncle or a grandfather that tells amazing anecdotes. There's a DNA to that, right? So I think if you don't have that grandfather, just you should go to the LLM. is the best next thing, and try to work out with it. All right, how can I tell this anecdote? How can I tell this struggles that I've been going through into the form of a story?
Mr. Nico, how do you measure whether a tech story has successfully landed with its audience?
Um, the thing you gotta have in mind when you create anything artistically is that you're only responsible for getting things out, but you're not responsible for how people react to them, right? Um, Hopefully, if you create something, you're gonna get feedback out of it, and people will respond. Some people will get to you and tell you personally, or they're gonna send you an email. But I don't think that tracking success of or the things we put out, especially when it's an artistic thing, right? If it's a brand, if it's a TV commercial, we have a lot of tools to track the success of it. I don't want to go to it, but as a creator, I don't think that you should be too worried about how people receive your work. You should be more worried about what is it that you intended to do with it, if that makes sense.
Makes sense, Mr. Nico. Makes sense. How can startups and researchers apply your method to explain their innovations better?
I think that going back, I mean, I think that this conversation has been oriented towards story, and I for a reason. I think, again, to reiterate, I think story is a great tool for connecting with other people. I think when we tell a story about a specific thing, let's say, for example, an innovation, let's say you're a research and you're trying to communicate with people in your field. What you try to do is to bring that abstraction of what you're working on, that complexity, this thing that may not be a very clear idea. You bring it down, you boil it down to something simple, something that can connect with others. And I think this connection can be, the impact this will have on everyday life. It could be an analogy about what you're doing with something that people understand, right? Um,
Yes.
or it can be a metaphor, right? What we do with analogies and metaphors is basically trying to bring an idea that could be abstract to a human experience, just so people can relate to it. So I think approaching storytelling from a very conceptual point of view, right? Trying to reduce this complexity to something, to its principles and fundamentals, and trying to find analogies to tell that story is important. And if you can attach a human struggle to something, if you can tell us, okay, what influenced your research? What did brought you to the point where you are now? What did you have to go through? And how you succeeded and why? Why did you believe this was important to you and you hope that it will be important to others? I think that's the way to kind of like sneak in complex ideas and abstractions into a community of people that may not be primed to understand exactly your frame of work, but could benefit from the research that you're doing, if that makes sense.
Makes sense and very well said, Mr. Nico. Beautifully, beautifully articulated. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please to listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in its third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Nico, what's one thing you wish all technical communicators understood about storytelling?
Human stories are the only way to connect with other people. So use that, open with that, make that your conduit to tell more complex abstractions.
Mr. Nico, Casavecchia. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your projects, or anything that you're doing right now?
You can follow me on social media with my name, and I'm always publishing new ideas and things.
New ideas indeed. And tell us what is behind your website.
Sorry, what? What is behind my website?
Yes, Stephen Curry behind the fit. What
Oh,
it's
I
all
see. I
about.
see. Oh, behind the fit. Oh, that's a project I did for a brand called Rakuten, featuring Stephen Curry. So it was a pleasure to work with. Very kind person, and we did this job promoting um, different brands that from underrepresented creators and fashion designers.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Nico Casavecchia because if you support him for sure, more and more and more empowering, well, films to come for sure. So, Mr. Nico, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. See you soon.
More to come, people. See you soon. And Mr.